My name is Mike Baltz, and I'm the coordinator for Let the Sun Shine In. I'm wrapping up the symposium with a talk about a program that is putting theory into practice to the next level by helping conservation interests in Southern Illinois achieve impacts at an ecologically significant scale, which is the end which in the end is really the ultimate goal of all of our conservation efforts. I've got approximately 25 slides, and I'm going to spend most of the next 30 minutes talking about what I've identified as the keys to success of the Let the Sun Shine In effort. So at the end of this, you'll understand where Let the Sun Shine In sort of came from, how it started. You'll have a good understanding of why we've been successful, and hopefully you'll begin thinking about how you can apply some of what we've done down here to issues that you might be having in other parts of the state or maybe even other parts of the country. At a glance, Let the Sun Shine In is a grant-funded effort that assists conservation interests in Southern Illinois with their efforts to restore and maintain upland oak ecosystems. So that's the big umbrella that we're all working under, and I'll reference that sort of metaphor again a few times later in the talk. Let the Sun Shine In is not a partnership. Rather, it's a group of partners collaborating. And that's important because sometimes there's a fatal flaw in partnerships, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. And the campaign is coordinated by a non-agency person who works for no one but helps everyone. And I think that's another one of the keys to the success of our effort. Stating the obvious, Southern Illinois is a special place. It's a place where, east meets west and north meets south. And as a consequence, there's a real diversity of habitats. And as a consequence of that, there's a real sort of lot of biodiversity. And owing to that, the specialness of this place and all the biodiversity, there are a lot of conservation interests down here, not just DNR, but certainly the Forest Service and the Nature Conservancy and lots of other groups and interests who are interested in protecting these special places. But sort of, embedded in all those special places are really embedded in a matrix of Oak Hickory Forest. And Southern Illinois historically was some version of completely forested, and it's still heavily forested. From the forest of the Illinois Ozarks in the west to the overview of the forest that you get from Garden of the Gods, that my wife is sort of some version of enjoying in this picture. There's a lot of existing forest here. But although things can look pretty good from, again, where my wife is standing, or if you're at the Ball Knob Cross and you're looking down over Trail of Tears in Hutchins Creek Valley, the reality is that upland oak forest is in trouble, and it's long been a conservation target for conservation interests in the region. What isn't really news to you all is that in the absence of disturbance over the last almost 100 years, the forest composition is changing. It struck me at one point that our oak forests are kind of like old oaks homes, right? Play on, old folks homes, old oaks homes, because really what we have is old oaks in the overstory. Really almost a complete lack of oak regeneration in parts of, the forest down here. And in the mid-story and understory, you have a suite of tree species that are ready to take over the canopy. And that, needless to say, is bad news for all of the plant animal communities that are sort of dependent on healthy oak forest ecosystems. And it's not just the trees, although it's sort of easiest to sort of see that happening with tree species, but the herbaceous plant species community is changing as well. There was a study that was done by a master's student in 1979, and that person went out into the Trail of Tears State Forest and was looking at did a survey of the herbaceous plant species in the understory, and found that on upland, dry uplands in the forest, there were 57 species that were commonly found. Just a short 45 years later, in 2014, Chris Benda went out into the forest and did some sampling, 80 plots in the forest, and found that only 7 of those species that were found in 79 were still common in the plots that he sampled. And not surprisingly, 2 species that had become very common were Virginia creeper and poison ivy, which are both very shade tolerant species. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, Chris did not replicate the sampling effort that was made in 1979, but I've talked with him, and he certainly agrees that his findings suggest that there's been a major change in the forest plant community since 1979. Researchers at SIU have been, sounding this alarm for several decades, really, and the Illinois Ozarks have the dubious distinction of possibly being the first forest in North Central America to completely convert from oak hickory to maple beech in the next less than 20 years. So I actually came to Southern Illinois in 2000 to work for the Nature Conservancy, and my job description was that I was supposed to start an Illinois Ozarks project. And I ended up spending a lot of time working in the cache, but we did start some conservation planning specific to the Illinois Ozarks, and we identified, upland oak forest as a conservation target, and numerous other conservation plans have been completed in Southern Illinois over the years, and they would include, the Forest Service plans and DNR plans and National Wild Turkey Federation plans and American Bird Conservancy. So there's been a lot of people doing conservation planning specific to Southern Illinois, and they've identified some similar issues. And if you look at these plans, I say here, like, a close reading of the plans reveals that there is significant overlap in conservation goals between the plans. And so if you look at sort of 3 plans that I'm pretty familiar with, which would be, the Wildlife Action Plan, the Nature Conservancy's plan specific to the Ozarks of the Shawnee National Forest Management Plan, you have maintaining oak dominance, protecting biodiversity and reconnecting or defragmenting forests as common themes in all these plans. So if we're going to talk about the origin of Let the Sunshine In, I think that the embracing of mission overlap, the recognizing and embracing of the mission overlap in these planning documents was certainly a precursor to Let the Sunshine In. And I'm going to plug myself as an early player in this effort before it was called Let the Sunshine In, mainly to highlight, I think, my lack of success in a way. But I did sort of start an Illinois Ozarks Ecosystem Partnership, which was part of the DNR's C2000 program. And I was also involved in spearheading, officializing, right, concretizing a partnership between the Nature Conservancy and the Forest Service and DNR specific to the Illinois Ozarks, and really those acknowledging those goals, maintaining oak dominance, protecting biodiversity, and working to defragment the forest. But Let the Sunshine In really got started, and this is my short version of the story, in the early 2010s, when Jody Shimp and David Allen and Scott Christ and Tracy Fiddler and others began developing a collaborative campaign that addressed oak ecosystem health and forest management at the Trail of Tears State Forest, so specific to Trail of Tears. And they used a landscape stewardship approach that was outlined in this Forest Service document, the Landscape Stewardship Guide planning document. That effort was successful, and I certainly think that it had a lot to do with the first big grant that really officially launched Let the Sunshine In, which was a Forest Service a landscape scale restoration grant that we received in 2016. So Let the Sunshine In officially began in 2016, and now I want to really highlight those sort of 5 keys to success. First, as I've noted, adopting the landscape stewardship approach to addressing the big audacious goal of maintaining oak forest ecosystem health in Southern Illinois was important because we started building on a solid foundation. We've also then organized around this Constellation collaboration model of operation rather than a traditional partnership. And I'll expand on why that's important. We've created some very effective messaging. We've focused our implementation in high priority areas, and we've created a way to really facilitate cross-boundary work. So I'll address each of these points in these next few slides. So first of all, we've improved on the traditional partnership model by adopting this form of organization called Constellation collaboration. And it works much better than traditional partnerships because there's a coordinator that keeps partners engaged. So here is sort of the model pulled from this paper, Sir on 2006, and I've put in a lot of information specific to Let the Sun Shine In. So, for instance, the big umbrella that had all of us working down here in Southern Illinois was oak ecosystem health. So that's the big umbrella. And the partners were doing different things. So IDNR was working on, developing forest stewardship plans for private landowners. The Nature Conservancy was down here. Like I said, we were trying to start partnerships. We were pre-acquiring land for the Forest Service and DNR. We were lobbying for the Forest Service to get funding for land acquisition. And of course, then the Forest Service was working on all the things they work on, whether it was, forest management, land acquisition, those kinds of things. Well, I mean, we weren't operating in a vacuum. We all sort of understood that we were working together. And the idea was that because we had this shared vision, we should create a partnership. So we did that. And I think we signed some paperwork. It's probably in a filing cabinet somewhere over there at the Forest Service. And then nothing really happened. And that's a problem, I think, with a lot of partnerships. We signed these documents, and then we all go back above the line. It's that line that says, above the line is chaos and below the line is order. We all go back to working on our projects. And I think that's a fundamental flaw with a lot of partnerships. So what we've done and what this Constellation collaboration model does is it assigns, there's a coordinator, a person who's not a member of any of these agencies or groups. And that third party coordinator, like I said, is a catalyst and capacity builder. That person works for no one, but sort of helps everyone. So adding the coordinator adds a level of, accountability. We get together on a regular basis, all the partners, and we have good internal communication. And that internal communication allows us to sort of take advantage of all the potential synergy that exists because we are all sort of working together. And we have a lot of resources when they're combined at our disposal. So this Constellation collaboration model, I think, is huge, and it's a really big part of why stuff is getting done down here. And I think it has a lot of potential to be applied to other conservation situations in other parts of the state and country to help them be, maximally effective as well. So we've got a solid plan. We've got a coordinated group of partners collaborating, and we have really effective messaging, which is another big reason why we're successful. We do a great job of communicating the goals of forest management to the public, right? We have simple and easy to visualize messages that focus on the why of forest management, right? Why are we managing the forest? We're managing it to let the sun shine in, because with the sun comes life. And I think it's sort of because this is such an easy message to remember, but also because, there is some ongoing coaching of the partners. We are all saying the same thing. So if you talk to DNR people about what Let the Sun Shine In is, you'll hear them say, let with the sun comes life. If you talk to Forest Service people that are involved in this project, they'll say the same thing. So I like to say that, we've sort of created this impenetrable wall of consistent messaging, right? Which is pretty powerful, because it's sort of, when everybody's sort of saying the same thing, it's impossible to divide and conquer us, which is sometimes what folks will try to do. I want to say, I've got one slide here, and I just want to say two things, and I think this is really important. And it's sort of, I mean, it goes along with this effective messaging idea, which is forest management has a PR problem, right? Specifically, a lot of times we assume people understand that there's a problem, and they don't. And it's not because they're dumb or they're not paying attention. It's literally that most people today, who are alive today, have never actually seen a healthy forest. I mean, really, their experience of forests is of a 100-year-old versions of 100-year-old forests, or forests that haven't had natural disturbance for a long time, and they're full of invasive species. So we're proposing to fix a problem that most people don't even know exists. And secondly, we often lead with chainsaws and fire, right? And most people's basic reflex is to figuratively or even literally hug a tree, right? In the when they see chainsaws and fire, they rush to the forest to protect it, because fire and chainsaws in the forest is not like, it's not intuitive that that's good for the forest. So people have to be on board with the why before you start talking about cutting down trees and thinning the understory and burning the forest, or they're going to be tend to be like reflexively against you. So I just want to say that to sort of re-emphasize that what we've done is we lead with the why of forest management, not the how. And as a consequence, we don't lose people. We don't lose people right out of the gate. So I have my notes here. This is a big one. Put a star by that, okay? And think about whatever messaging that you might be doing back where you've come from, and are you sort of leading with fire and chainsaws, or are you leading with a simple message that communicates the why? So it's important to have a good message, but your messaging has to be effective as well. And I just want to say that I think we do a good job, and we're proactive with our messaging. We're sort of multimedia with our messaging, and our messaging is very local. We're not adopting some sort of national campaign and just I don't know, playing it locally. So I, as a coordinator, I am pretty active on local radio. I write for the local papers. We're creating a video library on a variety of topics. We also have, there's signage in the forest. This is a sign along the trail to Little Grand Canyon, which is Forest Service property. Here's a sign along a trail in Trail of Tears State Forest. Here's a kiosk at the trailhead of Devil's Stand Table at Giant City State Park. So we are, the message is sort of this, we're using the best available science to manage these forests for the desired outcome, which is let the sunshine in, because with light comes life, okay? We're not spending a lot of time trying to open closed minds. You can do that, but that's sort of got to be one-on-one. But with a lot of this messaging, our goal, I say, is to create a tidal wave of general public support. Having said that, talk is cheap and seeing is believing. So I think it's very important that we created a demonstration forest, or a demonstration site out at Trail of Tears State Forest. So it's roughly 1,000 acre demonstration site. There's 2 control areas. There's 2 other areas with slightly different management prescriptions. There's a kiosk in the woods. There's signage describing what we're doing. And it's really, and people can go visit it, and we lead tours there. And it's really, I mean, very open, honest. There's transparency here. You know, the Department of Natural Resources is basically saying, look, we're trying different management prescriptions here. We're trying to figure out what is exactly, you know, what's the best way to do this. You're welcome to come and look at it. We've got researchers in the field measuring, you know, avian response and plant response. You know, we're really honestly trying to figure out the best way to do this. So here's another great line. I love this line. I made this up. It says, good messaging and outreach create fertile ground for implementation. And so, you know, you create, if you do a good job messaging, you create a problem because everybody wants work done on their property. They're like, look, our forest, we've heard our forests need fire, our forests need thinning, you know, come out on our property and do it. But our project area is 11, you know, the southernmost 11 counties in Southern Illinois, and we can't be working everywhere at once. So what we've done is prioritize where we're going to be working. And so the first level of that effort was to do a forest block analysis, looking at 3 important criteria, and then identifying, you know, the highest priority areas that would have met those criteria. I mean, that's still big chunks of property. And so what we did then was even narrow that down further, and we created, you know, 8 forest stewardship clusters, and they're outlined in this map that you can see with, oh, I lost some acres on 1, 2, and 3 somewhere along the line. Maybe they come back when I do my next, click my next button. So we've created these 8 areas that we're going to focus our work on. And we've even gotten more specific by saying, in that first LSR proposal, that grant that we got, we said we are going to focus our work on these 2, just 2 of the 8 forest stewardship clusters, okay? Because we really want to pour a lot of work into a relatively small area, even though these are big chunks of forest, because we want to have an ecologically significant impact. Here come the acres for those clusters. We got our second round of funding, 3 years worth of funding. And in that second round of funding, we've said we're going to actually focus on 2 different clusters. Okay, and that number 3, the 32,000 acre cluster, is the cluster that includes trailed tier state forests. And we've even then submitted a proposal for a big chunk of money from the NRCS to do, you know, forest stand improvement and forest management. And we've focused essentially on 3 other separate clusters. So our we're being very, very strategic on our implementation, and that's not only a good conservation strategy, but sort of not surprisingly, it's pretty attractive to funders as well. If you drill down, so this little red circle just came up, and that's gonna, that shows the area of a couple of those forest stewardship clusters. If you drill down in any one of these clusters, there's a you know, a mosaic of land ownership. So this slide shows, you know, the Forest Service ownership is in green, state ownership is in blue, and then the yellow squares and rectangles and shapes represent private land with forest stewardship plans. These are landowners in the FDA program. And then there's still a lot of private landowners, you know, in our region that don't have forest stewardship plans. But if you know, these private landowners are really important to us getting, you know, large scale conservation done on the ground. And a lot of the grant money that we're chasing is used to provide cost share assistance to landowners in these clusters and help them implement forest management practices. Because, it's in doing that we're going to be able to sort of really work effectively cross boundaries. So the fifth of the 5 secrets to our success was the development of a database that had the information about private landowners in the forest, the FDA program. And so that enables everybody to look at a map. So on the right here, you see this Williams Hill cluster, and then you can begin to see, where the federal land is, where state land is, if there was any, and you can also see where, private landowners with forest stewardship plans are. When we have this kind of data, we can begin to then literally hire cross-boundary consultants to go out into this cluster and reach out to the highest priority private landowners and sort of get them on board with everything from, cross-boundary prescribed fire to working on, treating invasives on their properties. And we can really begin to sort of pull together large chunks of forest in sort of ecologically significant forest management actions. So this is just a slide that shows on the left, you've got the Williams Hill cluster. Inside that red rectangle is sort of an interface. The bottom of that is Forest Service land, and above that is private land with forest plans. So on the right-hand side of that, then the red squiggly line shows if you sort of took into account natural fire lines, inside that red circle is over 500 acres that you could burn all at once very effectively. And that's what happened in 2018. There was a large cross-boundary fire that involved, a relatively large crew, and even we got money from National Wild Turkey Federation for aerial ignition. So again, all the partners are working together to do a big cross-boundary burn that was facilitated by knowing and made easier by knowing about the private landowners in the area. So I'm right at 31 minutes and change, and I'm going to be wrapping up. So that's working out pretty good. In summary, we have Let the Sunshine In has been pretty successful in a relatively short period of time. And I think it's really, there's these 5 keys to success. We embraced a landscape stewardship approach to planning that was a very solid foundation that was endorsed by the Forest Service. The Constellation collaboration model has been a big improvement on traditional partnerships because it really sort of forces the partners to work together, where historically they didn't. We all like each other. It's just everyone's really busy. So it's that coordinator that's sort of the pest that keeps people meeting on a regular basis, talking and collaborating. We have a smart message, and I think we've created an impenetrable wall of consistent messaging and a tidal wave of public support. I love both of those sayings. We've gotten super targeted with our implementation by identifying forest stewardship clusters. And, within those clusters, because of our, this private lands database, we can really target outreach to private landowners that helps us very efficiently get cross-boundary work done. The last slide, for all intents and purposes, is what I'm calling a recipe for building a Let the Sunshine In effort. Right? So maybe like screenshot this or whatever, but it's 8-step process. Adopt this landscape stewardship approach to a large scale conservation problem. Okay. You need to work at a large scale. You don't want to look at not species scale, even community scale, but ecosystem level. Well, that's the second point. Address a big ecological problem. Employ this collaborative effort it's coordinated by an independent third party. I think that's going to work better than the traditional partnership. Work on creating smart, consistent external messaging that speaks to the why of what you're trying to do. It'll help get, the general public on board. Identify target areas to focus your conservation work. You don't want to be scattershot. Foster cross-boundary work with a private lands database to the best of your ability. And I think it's important to establish demonstration areas to sort of be transparent with your work and, show everybody that you're trying to fine tune your management efforts. You're trying to do, the best that you can. Last slide. It's the wrap-up slide. I just want to say that I think what you all are doing and what we all are doing is important. And on bad days, I'm buoyed by the forest's amazing capacity to persist and regenerate if we just give it half a chance. I think we're doing some things right in Southern Illinois and we're having success. And hopefully what I've talked about today will be helpful to you all in your worthy and worthwhile efforts to speak for the trees. So thank you. And if you have any questions, you can reach me via my email or there may be questions in the chat. But thank you for listening today.